Hello, my wonderful students. Welcome to the start of a new semester and welcome to 1316. By now you should have met me in class. So what I have here is a lecture where I talk about the concepts of the day, do some examples. You guys can watch these as many times as you want. I'm going to post the notes that I use online as well. If you have any questions while the video is going, write them down so you can ask me in class. All right. So the first section that we're going to go over is one of the most important sections I think I've ever had the privilege of teaching. This one is on logical fallacies. And this is about thinking critically, like hearing people make arguments on the radio, on talk radio, or in the news, and being able to pick apart and say, wait, that doesn't follow. Or they're making this kind of flaw in their reasoning. That's not how that works. So this is hopefully going to give you a name to those steps, and by being aware of it, you should be able to see it more when it occurs and hopefully be able to call it out. And possibly you've been on the end of experiencing some of these. Some of my examples are from my daughter and my father. So, all right, so first we have three lovely definitions. Logic is the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. Yes, that is a very fancy formal definition. An argument uses a set of facts or assumptions called premises to support a conclusion. Now, part of your homework is going to ask you to come up with the premise and the conclusion. So do be aware of that. A fallacy is a deceptive argument, an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Now, I would like to point out, this is not saying that it is a false conclusion. The conclusion could still be true, the premises could be true, but the structure of the argument doesn't follow logically. There's some flaw between what I said as my premise and what I said as my conclusion. That's what fallacy is talking about. So sometimes we get a little tripped up on, but that's a believable argument. It might be believable, but it's not well supported. Meaning if I was going to turn it in for a graded assignment or like try to submit it as a research article, I would get laughed at. And then probably cry, but that's me. All right, so you're going to see a little bit of this in the homework and quiz. So they are open notes, so have this in front of you. And I'm going to have it in a file so you can copy paste from the file. Hopefully you figured that out for the syllabus quiz. All right, so let's talk about these different kinds. So appeal to popularity. The old, but everyone else is doing it. Followed by your mom saying, well, if everyone was going to walk off the Empire State Building, would you? So many people believe P is true, therefore P is true. Mine was a little more subtle. The sales for the new Wonder Woman movie were higher than any other movie out, so it must be good since so many people are going to see it. This is just taking popularity, translating as it's good. I could say the same thing about the Howard Stern radio talk show. Lots of people tune into Howard Stern. He must be really good. A lot of people tune in just to hear what ridiculous thing he'll say next. Not because it's good, but because it's so bad. So, appeal to emotion. P is associated with a positive emotional response. Therefore, P is true. I like this one. Tom Hiddleston is featured in a Jaguar commercial, so I should buy a Jaguar because I like Tom Hiddleston. So it's a lot of these you'll see in ads, especially ads dealing with some sort of children product. There's almost always this appeal to, Well, you want to be a good mom, so you'll buy whatever. Or for kids, you want to have a fun time, so you want this toy. And parents are going, no, it's plastic crap. All right, appeal to ignorance. There is no proof that P is true, so it must be false. Doesn't work that way. This is actually misplacing the burden of proof. I can't prove your innocence, you must be guilty. That's not the way we hold that in our society, more or less. At least that's what we say. So here I went with, since scientists cannot prove that UFOs do not visit Earth, and when we translate this later, that's way too many negatives, we can assume they visit. So since we can't prove a negative, we get to assume the opposite? It doesn't follow. They could both be false. Personal attack. Yeah. I have a problem with the person or group claiming P, therefore P is not true. Usually this is, I can't figure out a way to poke a hole in the person's argument, so I'm just going to attack the person directly. Some of these, there's some overlap. Like, to me, that feels like a red herring because the person talking is related to the argument, but yeah, you'll see that one in a sec. So here I went with, since she's a white woman, anything she says about minority experiences must be wrong. So it's a little on the extreme side, but what I'm getting at here is just because someone is or isn't a particular way, it doesn't mean that what they say has to be wrong or has to be right. Like even Trump managed to say like one or two things that were correct. Kind of like a broken clock is correct twice a day. So it's paying attention to, are they poking at the argument or are they poking at the person? Like I think another one was, the first person is talking about they're concerned about the other person's drinking and the other person says, well, you drink. Yeah, I do. What does that have to do with your drinking? That's what this kind of setup is. I'm going to cut these kind of short so they're in little manageable sound bites. So I'll catch you guys in the next one.